Although it is Pride Month, it would be amiss for me to not address the elephant in the room, which is the LGBTQIA plus acronym, what it stands for, what it really means, and how is it playing out in reality, and how does it represent itself in theory. To break that down, LGBTQIA plus, each letter represents individual sexual orientation and or gender identity or gender expression. L stands for lesbian. Lesbian referring to females who were females assigned at birth and females who acknowledge themselves as females. And they are homosexual females who are also attracted to females assigned at birth who acknowledge themselves as females. Then you have G for gay. Gay can be used interchangeably for female homosexual and male homosexual, but the G in the acronym does represent males who are assigned males at birth and who acknowledge themselves as males. And they are male homosexuals who are attracted to males who are males assigned at birth and who acknowledge themselves as males. And then you have the B. The B stands for bisexual. Bisexual for both male and female. Males and females who are bisexual are people who are able to be attracted to both sexes or genders simultaneously. Their attraction is romantic and or sexual attraction for both genders or sexes. And then you have the T. The T stands for transgender or trans. And transgender is specifically referring to gender identity. Transgender is not referring to sexual orientation. A transgender person can be a male or a female. A transgender person can be a female assigned at birth, but the person acknowledges themselves as a male. Or it can be a male assigned at birth who acknowledges themselves as a female. They view themselves as the opposite gender from what they were assigned at birth. And then you have the Q. The Q stands for queer or questioning. What does queer mean? Queer was actually one of the newest letters added to the acronym because LGBT used to be the acronym from the mid-'80s to the early '90s, and the GLAAD organization added the Q in the year of 2016 for the purposes of inclusivity as well as recognizing people who have different ways of expressing their sexuality, but questioning people or queer people, they are not necessarily bisexual, they can refer to themselves as questioning or queer because they are on a spectrum and they do not like to refer to themselves as being lesbian or gay or bisexual. They do not think that they fit in those specific sexual orientations, either because they are still learning more about themselves and their sexual orientation, or they really don't like to define their sexual orientation. They are more fluid in their sexual orientation, so they prefer to be called queer or questioning. But primarily, people who refer to themselves as queer or questioning, they do not even refer to themselves as being heterosexual either. And the reason why is because they find themselves being attracted to males and females, and they find themselves even attracted to different gender identities or gender expressions. Now, there are other letters added to the acronym, such as IA plus. I stands for intersex, and intersex can refer to the biology, the physiology of the genetic sexual makeup of a person. So it doesn't refer to sexual orientation, nor does it refer to gender identity. Intersex used to be referred to as a person who was a hermaphrodite, but now they refer to hermaphrodite as intersex. And these people usually have both genitalia, the male and female genitalia, either externally or internally, or a combination of both. And then the A in the acronym represents asexual. An asexual person can be a male or a female, and an asexual person is not someone who has sexual desire. An asexual person is not sexually attracted to males or females. They do not have any sexual desire, but they may have a desire to develop friendships or companionships or romance with either sex or gender. Now, asexual people, they can be either heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual. But their attraction is more platonic as opposed to sexual. There are asexual people who are on a spectrum. Some asexual people are able to have minimal sexual attraction for a male or a female, or both male and female. But an asexual person who is exclusively asexual, they have no sexual desire or sexual interest in anyone. But they can be on a spectrum to where they can have some interest in a person sexually. But primarily their interest is more romantic and platonic. When you keep adding on to the acronym, it's going more into gender expression and how people express their gender. And that's what I want to talk about as well. I am Giselle Wallace, certified gay life coach and author. Here on my YouTube channel, I provide my lesbian perspective. And if that interests you, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. LGB and TQ plus is divided, or is it not? Let me tell you about a couple of experiences I've had, and then I'll share with you what I've learned from other people within the LGBTQIA plus acronym, or even from the heterosexual community. Now, Obviously, the heterosexual community is not a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, but heterosexual people still have their own ideas and perspectives about the acronym LGBTQIA plus. There's a lot of information, and of course, time won't allow for me to go into deep details, but I'm going to break down some of the things that I've noticed about this divide where the LGB acronym is divided from the TQ plus acronym. And why is that? Well, I've already mentioned that the acronym represents sexual orientation and or gender identity or gender expression. The LGB acronym represents lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. These are people who are recognized according to their sexual orientation. And they do not feel that they should be added or inclusive with people who refer to themselves as trans or queer or questioning or intersex, because it refers to gender identity and gender expression, or people who are not able to express themselves exclusively as being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. They refer to themselves as queer or questioning. Many people who are in the LGB acronym, because of the challenges and the discrimination that they have experienced, primarily from people who identify as heterosexual, they do not want to be referred as being queer or questioning. I'll tell you what I think personally. I do not like to be referred as being queer because I understand the history of the word queer, and the word queer derived from the heterosexual community, and the term or the phrase was used in a derogatory manner against lesbian and gay people or homosexual people. They would call lesbian and gay people queers. It was a very derogatory, insulting saying. It was a slur. It actually still is a slur. But today, like I say, this is recent when GLAAD added the term queer to the LGBTQIA acronym in 2016. So this is very recent. I don't refer to myself as queer, and I don't allow anyone else to call me queer. I identify as lesbian. And I've had experiences, very negative experiences, where people become offended that I refer to myself as a lesbian, and they demand that I refer to myself as a queer woman. And anytime somebody tries to coerce me or combat me in how I represent myself, that is a red flag. It also is an offense. I am who I am, and I know who I am, and I do not allow anyone else to define me. Usually when people want to change you, and when they want to create these theories or these scenarios to create conflict, to cause you to feel intimidated or doubtful about who you are as a person, this is very intentional. It is a way for people to try or attempt to steal your identity. They want to cause you to no longer acknowledge yourself as who you are because it offends them. The reason why they're offended is their own personal reasons. As I said earlier, that word queer is not a term from lesbian, gay people. It is a term that derived from homophobic, bigoted, heterosexual people. It is a slur. Word queer is originally a gay slur. It was targeted against lesbian and gay or homosexual people to insult them, to demean them, to antagonize them. And so I don't accept the word queer at all. And it's really interesting how queer is being used now as if lesbian and gay people always refer to themselves as queer. This is not historical. This is not true. The queer word is really just like the F-bomb. And I can't say the word due to censorship, but queer was on the same level of the F word, the F-bomb word. And I absolutely do not use the word queer, and I do not allow anyone to refer to me as queer. And I definitely don't allow someone to manipulate me or antagonize me into referring to myself as queer instead of lesbian. So you have to be careful to not allow people to try to steal your identity, to avoid people who try to make you feel ashamed of who you are and how you define yourself, because their intention is always to get what they want out of you, and that is to control you, that is to erase you, erase your identity. It is lesbian erasure. It is gay erasure. So be careful when you run into people who try to manipulate you into erasing your identity. And this goes into how I feel about the word cisgender. Cisgender was a word, a term that was created by the transgender community, the trans community, because they wanted to make a distinction between trans men and trans women and biological men and biological women. So cisgender refers to a biological male who is assigned the sex and gender male at birth, and the person acknowledges themselves as a male. And likewise, cisgender for female refers to a female who was assigned female at birth for her sex and her gender, and she acknowledges herself as a female. So the term cisgender is to give you the distinction of being someone who was assigned at birth, male or female, and you accept yourself according to your assigned gender at birth. There was a lot of debate. There was some major conflict with trans people wanting women to refer to themselves as cisgender women. And a lot of women were very defensive. And I agree, because being a woman means that you are a biological woman. The term, you can't erase what it means. So for me, it all goes back to erasure, erasing your identity. I am a woman. I don't feel the need to refer to myself as a cisgender woman. I don't even refer to myself as a cisgender woman. I say I am a woman, but I also say I am a female, because when you are a female, that means that is your assigned sex at birth. So my assigned sex at birth is female, whereas someone who is trans, their assigned sex at birth may be female, but they don't acknowledge themselves as a female. They acknowledge themselves as a male. So they would be a trans male or a trans man. And they are going to provide a distinction in their gender identity by referring to themselves as trans. So that's fine, because that allows them to make a distinction about their gender identity when they use the word trans. And then when they say trans man or trans woman, then you are able to get clarity on how they identify their gender. and you will automatically know what their assigned gender at birth was. I don't want to have to call myself cisgender because I never referred to myself as cisgender. It is a new term that was created by the trans community, but I don't agree with them forcing people to call themselves cisgender. And there was a lot of debate and conflict between trans people and biological males and females who did not want to call themselves as cisgender. I don't refer to myself as cisgender. I say I am a woman. I also say I am female. And that's how I believe about that. As long as you respect how people want to identify, that's the bottom line. Don't tell someone to call themselves a name or a term if they don't want to. That is very intrusive. It's very controlling and manipulative. And your intention for doing so is very questioning. Why are you so concerned about someone to change or call themselves a name that they never originated with? The name didn't even derive from them. It comes from you. So it's like, don't force someone or call someone a name that they did not call themselves, that they do not approve of. And it's just basic respect. Now, what I do want to get into is the gender identities and the gender expressions. I do not agree with people who say things such as, what is a woman? Or there is no such thing as a woman. And a lot of that has been going on. It has created so much division within the acronym LGBTQ plus, because I am a woman and I acknowledge that women exist. So for someone to say what is a woman or women don't exist, to me that is very misogynistic. And it's also discriminatory against the female sex. I do not agree with people trying to erase the female sex or erase women from existing. When people discuss gender or sex, you want to understand what they mean. Sex is male or female. Sex is what you are assigned at birth. Gender, on the other hand, is how you identify yourself as being male or female or other. Because you can identify as a female, but you were assigned at birth to be a male. Or you can identify as being a male, but you were assigned at birth as a female. So gender is how you identify. And you also can be assigned at birth as a female and you identify your gender as female. Or you can be assigned at birth as a male and you identify your gender as male. Gender identity is not about sexual orientation, and gender identity is about how you express yourself according to male or female. It is very complex because it can deal with hormones. Every human being has male and female hormones. Some have more hormones than the other. And it can get even deeper when it goes into chromosomes. And then you have behavior. So some people may behave like the sex that they physically look like, but then there's people who do not behave like the sex that they physically look like. You know, you could see a person and you can say, okay, that's a male, but you're looking at them physically and saying that's a male, but that person can identify as a female. So you don't know how a person identifies according to their gender unless they communicate that information to you. Another issue I have when it comes to gender expression and gender identity is when people who don't define their sexual orientation, they do fall into that questioning or that queer category, the Q. But they also sometimes fall into the gender expression category, but not necessarily the gender identity category, meaning they don't identify as trans or transgender, but they use certain pronouns. And this was very interesting to me because there's different pronouns out there that people use that I wasn't even aware of. So it is a learning curve, and I'm ever learning. I'm always interested in learning. I think people identifying as themselves is wonderful, but my main concern is that people don't call other people names and tell them that this is how you should name or define yourself. No, your identity is your own personal decision. It is a part of who you are. So you should focus on yourself and how you identify, but don't project. Don't manipulate. Don't control people on the outside of you. Because when you start doing that, obviously there's something within yourself that makes you very uncomfortable or insecure if you are so focused on making sure someone else on the outside calls them a name or makes themselves identify as something or someone who you want them to be. That's just like heterosexual people being bigoted and discriminatory towards people within the LGBTQIA plus community. They want to isolate us. They want to erase us. They want to create laws that discriminate against us. That's why there are anti-LGBTQIA plus laws. So we have to consider, how are we acting towards each other within this LGBTQIA acronym? Why is all this infighting going on? Well, I'm explaining to you why there is so much division. Because people are not respecting people. That's why. But there was an incident. I was on social media. This was a few years ago. I was on Twitter. This is way before it was called X. And at this time, you could pretty much communicate with anybody. Like, you could send DMs to anybody. You could reply to anybody's posts. But those days are gone, at least on Twitter, which is now called X. Now people can post and they can change the setting where they only allow their followers to reply. So if you're not following a person, you can't reply to them. And same likewise with DM or direct message. If you don't follow them or if they don't follow you, you can't send them a direct message. So these are different settings. Now, you know, I have my own opinion about that, but that's another story. To me, it was more social before X came into the picture, where Elon Musk now bought out Twitter. To me, it was more social. It was more fun, more creative when it was Twitter. And you could socialize with more people. But anyway, I remember I was letting people know about my coaching business. And I was informing people that I coach the LGBTQ plus community. It was just a way for me to reach out to people and let them know that I was here. There were some people who replied to my post. The people were from the Q community, the queer questioning community, but also they were people who expressed themselves with different genders, different pronouns. They were not trans people, but they use pronouns such as they and them, or they would say no label. And one that was very different, I never heard of before, they called themselves it. It. And then you had some of them who said that they didn't believe that gender existed. You had some who said that they don't believe women exist, but they believe that men exist. It was a lot going on. And some of them said that they were interested in one gender or one sex more than the other. For example, you may have had a woman who said that she was more interested in men than women. And she didn't refer to herself as bisexual because she doesn't want to be considered someone who is attracted to both sexes and genders equally. But some of these people who were a part of the Q plus acronym, they told me things such as, I am not interested in your coaching business because you are a lesbian. And some of them replied and they said, I do not want to be a part of the lesbian or gay community. Some of them used the word hate. They said, I hate the lesbian and the gay community. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I was blocked by some of these people. They said some pretty foul words about me, and they didn't even know me. Mind you, I'm on social media. I'm posting from my page, or I was replying to people who I followed or knew. And you know, everybody can see your posts. So there were people who would reply to my posts, and I wasn't sending posts to them. I was posting someone who I followed just to, get information out about me offering coaching for the LGBTQIA plus community. And some of the people from the Q plus community would reply to my posts and they would say, I don't want to be a part of the LGB community. And sometimes I would respond and I would ask, may you explain why you feel this way? Because I was trying to learn and get information. And many of them did not want to be a part of the LGB community. They did not like lesbians, gays, or bisexual people. And this was the Q questioning queer community. It was very surprising to me because I am very accepting of everyone. So when they rejected my service, they were not only rejecting my service as a life coach, and that's fine. I don't get offended about that necessarily because you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But it was more so that they didn't want to be a part of the LGB community. They wanted to be separated. They wanted to be divided. They did not accept LGBT people. So it was more so they were showing discrimination towards lesbians, gays, and bisexual people. And so I was learning that they're creating the division. They're causing the infighting. I've heard phrases such as, I hate when they call it the lesbian community. I hate when they call it the gay community. I am not lesbian. I am not gay. I'm queer. I'm questioning. There are some people who even say that they're straight questioning. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I'm straight questioning, meaning I live a heterosexual life, but at the same time, I sometimes may date someone of the same sex. But these people were very homophobic, very biphobic. They wouldn't even want to be referred to as being bisexual. They said, I don't want to be a bisexual. I'm not bisexual. I'm straight questioning. So this is the conclusion of this, because this is a lot of information, and if you've made it here, you are a real one. And if you are not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. To conclude the whole LGB divided from the TQ plus, I'll say this. And about the trans community, like I say, I'm accepting of the trans community. I do not try to discriminate against anyone. I do sometimes run into trans people who do have some anger towards the lesbian, gay, bisexual acronym or community. And the reason why is because trans people are not necessarily homosexual people. As I explained earlier, being trans or transgender is not about sexual orientation, it's about gender identity. And many people who are trans identify as heterosexual. And you know what? I have come across some trans people who are homophobic. They identify as heterosexual and they do not like homosexual people. They do not want to be a part of the LGBTQIA acronym. They don't want to be associated with it. They say, I'm trans, I'm transgender. I am not gay, I am not lesbian. And they're not. Because if they're not gay or lesbian, they're not. But they may not even be necessarily homophobic, but they do not want to be referred to as being a homosexual, because many of them don't identify as homosexual. They identify as heterosexual. So we do have to respect how people's gender identity or gender expression or sexual orientation is applied. You have to have these conversations. You have to understand what people are thinking and feeling and how they're behaving. We can't assume anything. A lot of people are angry because no one understands them. And everybody is calling them a name or giving them an identity that they don't call themselves, that they don't identify as themselves. So we have to look at it as a whole. We need to stop calling people names and forcing names and identities on people who do not call themselves those names or those identities. Allow people to be themselves. Allow people to identify as themselves. And how can we get to this point? We have to communicate with each other. We have to respect each other. And you don't have to understand everyone and everything, but just know that there are people who exist in this world who are different from you. And that is fine. As long as nobody is harming you or harming other people or even harming themselves, then we can have some more peace. Now, as far as how this LGBTQIA plus acronym situation is going to pan out, who knows? At the end of the day, we need to learn more about ourselves. We need to start with ourselves. We need to acknowledge ourselves. We need to accept ourselves, and we need to love ourselves. And that will be a great start. And then be more self-aware. Don't be so self-absorbed to the point where you don't care about anyone else and how they feel and how they identify. Sometimes all it takes is a listening ear. And we can come together. Now, there will be people who don't want to come together. They want to be divided. They don't want to be a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. They don't think it is a community. Well, that's up to them. But me, I know who I am. I love myself. I'm at peace with myself. So I don't have an issue with how somebody else identifies. But don't force me to call myself a name or an identity that I do not call myself or identify as. and we will be just fine. I hope this message resonates with you. I am Giselle Wallace, certified gay life coach and author. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like and share this video, and have a rainbow day.